Hi guys, so I thought I would just do a little process video. So I wanted to come back to this piece because I really liked it and kind of develop it further using kind of what we're learning this month about colour mixing and limited colour palettes. So I did this tonal sketch and then I'm going to paint it again using the same reference image, kind of using the reference photo, using my tonal sketch and using a limited colour palette, and see how that turns out. Yeah, I think with a complicated image like this, going in with a limited colour palette can really help make it cohesive and kind of take away some of the colour decisions. So what I've done, because it's in the sketchbook and I want to paint it in the same sketchbook, is I scanned it, I printed it out kind of roughly the same size, and then I was going to trace it but I couldn't find my tracing paper, so what I actually did is I put pan pastels on the back and then put it on the paper and then drew over it with a pencil, so I've kind of got a very rough guideline here just as a time saver, because I'm like, I've drawn it once, I don't want to have to draw it again from scratch. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So the colour mix that I'm going to use for this one is this kind of primary colour mix, so primary blue, primary yellow, primary red and white, which we've seen before in my last video. It kind of gives us this kind of colour range here, which I thought is just perfect for this image. Like these kind of blues, that dark egg blue is perfect, that very, very soft pink and stone colour, perfect. Greens, it's got everything. Like within this mix we've got everything that we need in the image, and it's going to keep everything looking very, very harmonious, and like I say, make it nice and easy to choose the colours, and hopefully it'll feel really harmonious, and I can also focus on the tones, which I want to do in this image, create a sense of depth using tone. So we'll see how it goes. So I'm just starting by preparing my palette, mixing up some colours. So I've just got these three really, really bright primary colours and white, and I'm going to try and mix everything from them. So all the different kind of greens and pinks and peaches and the very dark tones as well, and greys. So starting with, I've got sort of an orange and then a really lovely muted grey brown mushroomy colour. And just mixing up a little bit of green here. And just the three primaries mixed together can be very dark, so when working with gouache I do like to include white because it does really transform the colours. So we've got a very muted sage green. I'm just going to paint some little swatches on the page opposite to just see how they're looking together and see how they're looking on the paper. They're kind of looking darker and more muted than I expected, but I will adjust as I go along. So I'm just adding a bit more white to the green. And that's kind of a very soft greeny grey. And that's more of a brighter duck egg blue, which is quite nice. Just testing and adjusting as I go along. And testing out a bit of that peach, just seeing how everything looks together. Got a very soft kind of muted peach there.
Okay, I think I'm ready to get started. I've kind of got the palette ready to go. Okay, so I'm just going to pop the image back up so you can see what I'm working from. I always think the photos look a little bit different when I incorporate them into a video, so I'll include this image in the post as well, because I think in the video you can't really see the peach tones in the building, but if you look at the image on the post the colours are a bit brighter, so I'll include the image as well. But I'm starting with that statue in the middle. So with this piece my focus is using a limited colour palette, but also creating a sense of depth. So I did that tonal study first, which I really loved, and it kind of really pushed me to create that sense of depth with having the dark trees in the foreground framing the image, and then these lighter buildings in the background, and then our kind of mid-ground having the statue, which is kind of the focus of the image. And I thought it was a really beautiful photo, the kind of scene you can imagine in a lovely kind of town square in Europe. I thought it had really lovely light and lovely colours, so I thought it'd be a great one to give it a go. And you can kind of imagine painting a piece like this on location when you're travelling, and being able to do it with a limited colour palette is great, because that's less stuff to carry around with you when you're travelling. So yeah, this piece is an exploration of tones and using a limited colour palette. So I'm kind of painting the building in first with a small brush and leaving white space for the windows, and kind of leaving white space on the kind of plinth where the statue is, where the lines meet, the kind of the facets of the stone meet. And I'm kind of enhancing the colours in the image, but yeah, this is quite an experimental piece for me, so my painting style is going to be a bit all over the place, because I like to do a little bit and see how it looks in relation to something else, and then do a little bit more, and always adjust everything to see how it looks in relationship to each other, which means I often skip around the painting. I'm not very methodical. I don't kind of work left to right or top to bottom or anything like that. I just kind of go backwards and forwards across the painting. So I'm just mixing a dark green here, and I'm using a filbert brush because I want to get lots of colour down and not be too fussy about it, so I'm using quite a large brush. And I really love that pop of kind of zingy, zesty, greeny yellow behind the statue. I think it's a lovely contrast with the warmer tones of the statue and the stonework, and then to have that zingy yellow behind. It's not a colour I use very often, so it's quite nice to include that. And then just putting in a tree branch. As you can see, it's completely intuitive. I'm just kind of seeing how one thing looks next to another thing. So I haven't done all the green of the trees all together. I've done a bit of green, and then I've seen how it looks with the yellow, and then I'm going back in with more green, and the same with the painting the stone in the building. So just kind of seeing what works as I go along. This is just my size 4 brush, just doing very loose brush marks. I want to kind of capture this in an impressionistic way rather than trying to capture every individual leaf accurately. Just trying to mix up a nice dark colour for doing the statue, so just kind of equal proportions of the three primary colours will give you a dark muted colour. When all three primary colours are in equal proportions, it's going to be dark and it's going to be muted, and then if you have mostly two and just a little bit of one other colour, so let's say it's mostly yellow, mostly red and just a little bit of blue, it's going to be much brighter. But yeah, that's quite a nice colour for the statue. And if you're mixing a chromatic grey like this and it doesn't look right, like it's looking too purple, you just add the opposite colour, so add more yellow. Or if it's looking too green, add more red. So whatever colour it's looking, add the opposite colour and it'll balance it out. Just putting in the statues of the little people very, very loosely. But all the time just looking at how everything interacts with everything else. So those now draw the eye because they're the darkest thing in the image, and they make that peach background kind of look lighter against them now that they're there. And then just popping in some shadows, so using the same colour as statues but really, really watered down, and just putting that shadow in over it. I have to use my imagination a little bit in this image because it's got that kind of motion blur at the bottom, which I don't want to be bothered capturing. And just putting in some more of that yellowy green, which is really nice. It's very fresh, and you can kind of see the sun catching the light, catching the leaves. Going in with a bit of the blue now, which I haven't done yet, but I love those together, and it's kind of a triadic colour palette, which is not something I use very often at all. A triadic colour palette would be red, yellow and blue, which obviously those three colours together can be a lot, but it's a very soft version of it because we've got the very soft peach and the very soft blue and the very soft and then that kind of zingy yellow, which is really nice together. But my tip for painting buildings very, very simply is just leave space for the windows and the doors, and it just gives it the impression of being a building. And I've just realised I've got kind of muddled with the image that the yellow leaves actually come right up behind the statue, and I've probably put too many of them in, blocking out the blue building, but it's very easy with a busy piece like this to get muddled, but it's just, you can always work with it and kind of fix little mistakes like that, just make it part of it. And then just putting some shadows and some depth in and those darker green leaves. And just putting in the palm trees. And then mixing up more of that dark colour for the stem of the palm tree. At this point I can kind of see it coming together, I can see everything kind of working in relationship with each other, that the colours feel very balanced, working in relationship with each other, and that the tones feel balanced as well. I've got a mix of light and dark and mid-tones. Just putting in the lamppost again using that dark colour. And this is sort of an even darker dark tone than what I was using before, so just putting a tiny bit more shadow on the statue and putting the trunk on the palm tree. And then I'm going to tackle the trees on the other side now, which are different trees. The other ones are more leafy and these are more kind of piney looking, like they've got needles at the end, which I think is going to be possibly trickier to capture. And they're quite dark, but maybe they're a bit more blue toned. So I'm just mixing up another green at the moment. You see I mixed up all the colours at the beginning, but that was really just a starting point, and then I kind of adjust as I go along. But it's good just to have that starting point there to kind of see how everything looks together. I'm not sure what I'm doing with this bit. I'm not quite sure how to capture the pines without doing them all individually. I've decided to go dark and bluey and use quite a lot of dry brush, using my filbert brush, and to push myself more a bit in terms of tones. So I've gone back to the other trees and put some darker tones in, just thinking back to the tonal sketch that I did at the beginning, and just thinking, am I really being true to that tonal sketch? Because I love doing tonal sketches, they look really beautiful, and then I think it's quite easy to do a lovely tonal sketch in black and white and then take it into colour and just disregard all that tonal information and just play it safe and have everything quite mid-toned and light-toned, and not actually push yourself with the tonal values and have some real dark tones in there. So I'm kind of trying to push myself now of bringing in dark tones, because my brain is saying this is a tree, it needs to be green, but then another part of my brain is saying yes, but it's in shadow, so actually it's greeny black, it's almost black because it's so dark. So yeah, I'm pushing myself to use these very dark tones that are going to give the image more of a sense of atmosphere. But yeah, the tree on the left hand side I'm leaving for the moment. I would describe that as unresolved, but I will come back to it. So yeah, just trying to draw those individual little pines. Not quite sure if that's working. But this is what I kind of find exciting about painting, that bit when you're in the middle of a painting and you're not quite sure how it's going to turn out, if it's going to look how you expect it to look, if it's going to look good, if it's going to capture what you wanted it to capture. Yeah, you kind of don't 100% know what you're doing, but you're just going with it and keeping moving forwards. And I think that's where kind of real growth comes from, stylistically and technique wise, is if you can push yourself out of your comfort zone just a little bit and be happy to be a little bit uncomfortable and not quite sure how a painting's going to go. That's where the kind of the good stuff happens and the real growth. So I've got almost like a purple now that I'm going on top to put some real depth into the trees. And the sketchbook is a perfect place for doing work like this, just playing and experimenting. That's what a sketchbook is all about. I think sometimes on Instagram it's easy for a sketchbook to look almost like a coffee table book, and every painting is perfect and very kind of controlled, and obviously sketchbooks are beautiful to look at, but I think they should feel like a place to experiment and play and mess around, and not everything in my sketchbook works out. So I'm just putting some more details in here. So I've got that peach colour, but I've got a darker, more muted version of it, and I'm just putting the little details in. So the I think they're called lintels, or I don't know, the windowsills, you know, the details on the window, which just brings it together. If I was doing mixed media, I could just do that with a pencil, but I've kind of committed just to painting this whole thing, and then popping in a bit of blue for the in the windows, and then using that darker blue to put the details in on that building. And then kind of guessing what would be in the foreground, because I can't really see it, but I'm just going to use a bit of neutral colour there, and just putting the little details in on the top of the building. Like, if I wanted to, I could probably do this piece again and take much longer and do it much neater and much more detail, so really capture all the little details in the building and go in with like pencil and that kind of thing. But what I really wanted to achieve with this one is just a kind of study of the colours and of the tones. So for that I wanted to work quick and loose. I think it's hard to do something that is kind of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and is experimental, that's also very detailed and very controlled and kind of perfectionistic. I think it's hard to do both at the same time. I'm just putting in a very light muted peach wash in the sky, which kind of just ties it all together.
So that is that piece done. That was very much a piece where I obviously had a plan, which is I've got this tonal sketch, I've got this colour palette, but I still did not know how it was going to go halfway through. I think because, yeah, it's quite out of my comfort zone, but I did push myself with using these darker colours to frame it and really pushing that to the maximum and using these very dark colours and using these lighter colours. And I do love this colour palette, this kind of soft peach, the soft blue, and then this really zingy bright yellow. So I do love that colour palette. But yeah, that was a real challenge, but it pushed me out of my comfort zone, which is definitely good.